everybody. This is Soda,
And this is KLMeri.
and today we are continuing our voyage of watching Star Trek: The New Voyage.
So Soda and I, we haven't watched this show since sometime last year, but we decided to pick back up where we left off. So we watched episode 2 and episode 3 of um, New Voyages, and yeah, I'm. I say let's just jump into it.
Yeah, the interesting thing about these two episodes is they both feature characters, actors,
Hmm.
major actors from the original cast. I mean, last time we had the actor who played the Sal or something, but this time we have
Yeah,
like serious bridge crew characters.
yeah, and you know what? For both episodes.
Yeah,
Let's talk about episode 2. This is
to serve all my days. Yeah,
yeah. So to serve all my days, first thing I noticed about this when the credits were rolling in the beginning is that it said it was written by DC Fontana.
yeah,
Definitely perked up my interest. So I was expecting a Star Trek episode in terms of the writing, and I don't think it disappointed me in that respect. So we definitely
yeah.
had an actual writer from the show coming back, um, someone who, as we know now, was pretty famous, wrote some pretty popular episodes and novels. It boded well.
Yeah, and they used it. I noticed that they used it as a selling kind of a selling point for the episode. A lot of their
Hmm.
videos kind of ended with like a call to watch the episode written by DC Fontana.
Yeah. So the one thing I did not pay attention to, which I did in the next episode, was the credits in the beginning on who was starring. So it
Hmm.
did kind of take me by surprise.
Yeah, but I mean the next. Well, we'll talk about the next episode, but the next episode you didn't even have to look at the credits because you kind of saw who was playing in the first five
Oh
minutes.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So to
yeah.
serve,
No, they definitely spoiled that one right up front.
yeah. Well, let's start to serve all my days. So kind of a recap. We open with the Enterprise waiting above Babel, the neutral planetoid where all the Federation conferences usually happen. And we're told that there is an economic conference this time. Nearby, Chekhov is ferrying some ambassador in a shuttle to Babel because the ambassador doesn't want, shares McCoy's fear of transporters. She's old school, she prefers
Hmm.
shuttles. The ambassador is called Reina. They kind of talk. It turns out she knew Chekhov's grandfather. And there's the kind of a
Dimitri.
yeah, and there's a hint that they were romantically involved, and she also kind of flirts with Chekhov. That is very Star Trek. That is very Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah.
That feels like something Gene Roddenberry would have written in. Um, Suddenly, they are held up by a Klingon vessel, by a Klingon vessel, and the Klingon vessel is commanded by a guy named Karg. And Chekhov has to kind of perform some, fancy flight maneuvers to get them away and to the safety of the Enterprise. Then we kind of learn through the talk between Karg and Kirk, while Kirk is kind of chasing him away, why the economic conference is happening. Apparently, the Federation's economy is collapsing on the outer colonies of the Federation. A lot of new
Hmm.
colonies are just incapable of sustaining themselves, and they are being abandoned, and the Klingons kind of swallow them up.
Yeah. They call it an economic collapse,
Yeah.
right?
So while the Enterprise continues patrolling the area, suddenly they see another Klingon ship that is beginning to follow them, cloaking and uncloaking, and kind of a lot of weird stuff start happening on the ship. A lot of things start malfunctioning. and they suspect that the Klingon vessel has something to do with that. Um, that causes some explosion, which Chekhov saves Scotty from, and Chekhov gets hit with a big dose of radiation.
Mm-hmm.
And while initially it seems like nothing happens, the radiation causes the dormant virus that he contracted in the canon episode, The Deadly Years, to reappear.
Yep, that good old aging disease.
Yeah, for those who don't remember, in that episode, the triumvirate caught like an aging disease, and Chekhov was also there, but he was spared because he was given a shock of adrenaline with fear, and that kind of delayed the virus. Of course, in the episode they find a cure, but now McCoy is trying to use the same cure on Chekhov, but because the virus got this radiation, apparently it's stronger, and the medicine just doesn't work anymore. So Chekhov ages 25 years overnight, and instead of the young, spry new actor that they got, suddenly he's played by, the original actor Robert Koenig.
Yep. Surprise.
By
That was a
great,
surprise for me.
yeah, it was a nice surprise to see him appear there.
Of course. And perfect would just age him up, and suddenly we got the old actor back.
Yeah, I mean it's it's a better effect than the Asian makeup they had in the original series.
Of course.
Yeah. So while the Enterprise is dealing with, the Klingon ship that is pursuing it, cloaking and decloaking, Chekhov kind of has to deal with his own mortality. He feels kind of helpless because he wants, to help the ship, but he's kind of under strict orders to rest, and McCoy is
Hmm.
working around the clock to find a cure. He starts kind of seeing visions of his younger self, and they have this like really interesting talk about the reminisce, and they bring up all of those things that happened to him in the original series and what it means for him to be on the Enterprise and do his duty. It's a very nice talk. I kind of like it.
Hmm. And meanwhile,
Meanwhile, Karg, the Klingon captain from the first act, comes back and he contacts Kirk and he tells him, "Listen, the ship that is following you is not Klingon. Well, Klingons have no interest in interfering in the conference because the Klingons are enjoying the economic collapse. They know the conference isn't going very well, and they have no reason to interfere here." He's convinced that the ship is actually a Romulan ship that is disguised as a Klingon ship because the Romulans probably want the Klingons and the Federation to start fighting.
right.
Yeah. So he convinces Kirk to work together, and together they really stop the ship. And they discover that it's actually not even a Romulan ship, it's a Federation ship that is disguised as a Klingon ship. It's from a Federation world called wait, I wrote it down somewhere.
I don't remember, but they were called. It was piloted by some esoterians.
Yeah, Asterion or something, I think the planet is called. Basically, it's a Federation world that is very renowned for its technological advancements, but recently they've pivoted to manufacturing weapons, and they're afraid that because of the peaceful time they're in, their weapons will not be very useful.
And
And
also, they're one of the bankrupt planets.
well, they're bankrupt because of that, and
Right.
yeah, and they refuse to change their industry for some reason. Um, so yeah, they devised this plan to create a war between the Klingons and the Federation so that they can, their weapon selling businesses will be booming again. After all of that, Chekhov, well, he seems to die. There is like a cheery farewell and everything with Kirk and Ambassador Reyna, but then there is a stinger at the end of the episodes and he's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very weird.
It was interesting because in the Deadly Years, they cured it. And this is the original series extension, and they usually cure their ailments and
Yeah.
their save the day. So you're even expecting when the news is not looking good, like they're still struggling to figure out it, and Chekhov continues to age. But when he gets called to the bridge, right, to take up his old position
Yeah.
and help them, because he's the best
Yeah.
phasers officer they have,
Yeah.
weapons officer. When you think he's do that, and Kurt calls him up there because they're all like, "Oh, it doesn't look good for him. We haven't figured out a way to save it." I know where I want to be if I'm like a Starfleet officer and I'm dying. Like, I want to fulfill my duty.
Yeah.
And in a sense, that he does. He's been wanting to do that the whole time. So they call him up to the bridge and let him man that station, and he helps them defeat the enemy ship. And then he says he'll return to his quarters now. It's like his last hurrah. And at that point, you're thinking, this is like, where's the miracle? Right? And
Yeah.
then it gets worse because Ambassador Reyna, who's been visiting him this whole time, still kind of oddly like flirting with him in the beginning. And then it's just kind of a pity visit almost, although not really. Um, she comes to visit him one last time, and he talks about everybody who's come to like pay their last respects.
Yeah.
He can't even like sit up in the bed. Then she leaves, and then he's talking to himself about how he has no regrets, serving in Starfleet, even though it's one of those things where you could die at any time
Yeah.
from weird space diseases, if not in battle. And then cut to black, and he wakes up, and he's young again, and he says he
Yeah.
drank too much vodka. What
Yeah.
was that?
That made no sense. I mean, it's kind
No.
of, I kind of like this. I'll say this. I like both plots separately. I
Yes.
think that together they kind of had, there was no connection between them. Like, what was
No.
the connection between Chekhov facing his mortality and the economic collapse of the Federation? um, there really wasn't like connective tissue. There wasn't no thematic theme, and there was also kind of no plot connection. So it was kind of weird.
Hmm.
But they were both like good on their own. And the Chekhov plot is kind of, like I said, I really liked his conversation with his younger self, the older self conversing with his younger self. And I kind of also like the tearful goodbyes he had at the end, and this
Yeah.
like there was this beautiful shot at the end of like the younger self and the older self walking together and fading down the hallway. Um, but then they just kind of reversed it, so I guess all the impact is gone.
I guess what I didn't understand was, if you want to reverse it, and don't even want to really explain how you reversed it, and you're just going to leave it up to the viewer to assume, oh, was it did he really have too much vodka after drinking, having that nice like dinner and drinks with the ambassador? Was that all a fever dream? Because if it was, then it negates the whole other plot.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that and then you go, did that even happen? Like, no, that felt so real, and it was
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I think I read a little about it. I read up about it a little bit. I
Uh-huh.
guess it seemed that a lot of people were really upset when they heard they were going to kill off Chekhov,
Uh-huh.
and that's why the stinger
They had
was.
to walk it back.
Yeah, which
Mm.
I feel so annoyed about. Like, it's first of all, it's a fan show. So, and by that point we already had the movies, and we already had um you know uh
Yeah.
the next generation. I'm pretty sure was all, yeah, we already had the next generation. We had Deep Space Nine and Voyager and even Enterprise already. I think it was in the year 2000. So yeah, and people were so upset because a fan show killed the character. The character is still there in canon. You don't have to like, you don't have
Right.
to take everything as canon. And yeah, and like I said, I really also like the main plot, the A plot about the Klingons and the fake Klingon ship. I like the twist of it. I like that it turned out to be a Federation ship and not a Romulan or a Klingon. Um, because it felt very Star Trek-y, that human greed is like the biggest enemy of all.
I thought it was nice to get a Chekhov episode.
Yeah, that was nice.
In the beginning, he is portrayed, he's a young man. He's younger than a lot of the others that were the primary bridge crew. We kind of know him from the original series as like a young man who has a few romantic interests,
Yeah.
likes to flirt, and you continue to see that charisma, if you will, especially with Ambassador Reyna.
Hmm.
But it is nice to see, in a sense, how this relapse, if you will, the aging disease that like puts his, he has to face his own mortality in a very short period of time, how much he has matured from that person in the original series.
Yeah.
And just like you said, the conversations that he has with his younger self reminisce about the people they got to meet, the women they got to meet,
Yeah.
the entities they got to meet, all the things that they've done in the service of Starfleet. You could still see like he was a young man, even though he was aged, a young man who was regretting that he didn't get to go on and live, or he
Yeah.
wasn't going to. And
Exactly.
he's like, there's still so much I haven't done. But then you see him slowly come around to an acceptance, right? That even if it was a short life, it was, I did what I wanted and I don't regret it. And I'm very proud of what I've done. And I'm still the best weapons officer on the ship.
Yeah.
So there was a good sense of dignity, I think, at the end for him in his like dying scene, which unfortunately really does get undercut by kind of like walking it back by having him just wake up.
Yeah.
However, like I said, it was nice. It makes you reflect on your own mortality in a sense.
Yeah, he does.
A nice theme for his character specifically, I think. Because, he talks about his dreams, right? He wants to go on and do more as an officer. He wants to do more in his life personally, and yet
Yeah.
he does not have that opportunity, or so it seems.
Yeah.
It was a double edged sword. I was surprised that they didn't fix it. Like, they didn't give him a miracle drug. But at the same time, I appreciated them not being able to resolve this particular death.
And then they did.
And then they did.
Yeah.
But also, it was interesting listening to Walter Koenig kind of reprise his role later in life, yet reprise his role as his character would have been years ago. Even what we knowing about the actor and how, in a sense, like bitter he felt about some of what he was given to do or not do in the original series, right?
Yeah.
And then later on in like the movies. Some parts I was like, oh, it's Chekhov talking, but is it also Walter Koenig reflecting on his own mortality?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Chekhov aside, I love the plot, the other plot line. Kirk
Yeah.
doesn't want to trust the Klingons. Why should he? They went out of their way to make them look like old school Klingons. Got Karg. He's not a Kor or a Kang or a Koloth, but he's a Karg, and
He's the
he's
card.
very much your typical arrogant Klingon captain. Kirk is like, I'm not gonna do it. Like, I don't trust this guy.
My main problem was that the kind of the two plots, like I said, on their own, they're both pretty good.
Yeah,
Like they just didn't feel very connected. That
yeah.
was my main issue.
There were parts of the second one where they were trying to figure out who this enemy ship was once they realized it wasn't Klingon, and they're trying to like disable it. It had cloaking technology, right? And they're trying to like draw it out and disable it and figure out who the Marauder was. A lot of it was a little too neatly tied up, and I think it's because they had to give part of their focus to the other story, which was Chekhov's story.
Yeah.
So there was things like, oh, Raina shows up on the bridge once they've like disabled the Marauder. She's like, oh, I know who that is.
Yeah.
You don't even get a sense for the actual like Asterians, right? They're just some disgruntled looking people that Karg is like got in his grasp, and these guys did it.
Yeah,
And they give us like a brief explanation at the end, right? But they didn't lead us to think about it, right? They just gave us some context clues in the beginning about failed meeting at the conference planet, what's going on in the Federation at the time, but they don't really drop any more clues between then and like when Karg says it's not me, let's go figure out who it is. It's probably Romulans. So I think they could have given more. I think if you're right, if they had separated those two stories, they could have done both of them even more justice.
probably. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. So yeah, overall good, but it could have been a little better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next one.
Episode 3, World Enough and Time.
Yeah.
This one in the opening credits, it's right in your face. You've got George Takei coming back. Um, he is actually reprising his role as Captain Sulu in the open credits.
Not only him, I was actually kind of
Yeah,
surprised seeing next to him,
Grace Lee Whitney
yeah, Grace Lee Whitney.
as Rand.
I guess she's his second in command
I guess so.
because she took the con when he left. So yeah,
So it opens with Captain Sulu and I guess his second in command Rand on the Excelsior.
yeah. This is the movies era of the original series. They're wearing like the movies era uniform.
They're definitely in the movie era uniform. They recreated that for sure.
Yeah,
Um, with
a
those weird
shuttle.
uniforms.
Yeah. So yeah, we open on the bridge. A shuttle is approaching the Excelsior, and Takei, as Captain Sulu, um, he's talking to his
hmm
second in command, I guess, Rand, and he's like he started to reminisce about a mission that he was on years and years ago, back on the Enterprise, and then we flash back to the original series era and to the Enterprise.
Yeah,
Um, it's interesting. We usually don't get those cold openings in Star Trek. We usually have like Kirk narrating on like where we are and what we're doing, but
right.
yeah, we don't get that. So
This is flashback setup.
yeah, so the Enterprise is called to rescue a freighter that drifted into the Romulan neutral zone. Very much reminiscent of the Kobayashi Maru, which the characters also comment about. Um, they enter the neutral zone, and sadly, they are accosted by a few Romulan ships that decloak very quickly, and the freighter is gone very quickly. The Romulans use a sort of new advanced weapons to completely destroy it in like seconds.
Yeah,
And the Enterprise fires back on the Romulans, and they manage to destroy one of the ship, but because of the new weapon, I guess it causes some sort of spatial anomaly that traps the Enterprise in like gravitational waves.
yeah. They
And
call it a hyperdimensional field.
yeah,
And they allude to it having something to do with space time continuum. And I'm going to tell you the science of it went right over my head.
yeah. I mean, it's Star Trek. The science is really not that worth. Focusing on.
Well, the way they describe it, Soda, is they are trapped in this gravitational field that is like a point in the space time continuum of multiple universes. And unless they have all the coordinates of those universes, they can't break free from it. And if they don't break free from it, it will destroy the ship.
Yeah,
Yeah. I went, what? There's not just like a space time, a rip in the space time. It's like almost like the Tholian web where you're stuck in interphase or something. Except it's
seems
even
so.
worse. It's like interphase between dimensions, between
I,
universes.
yeah, seems so.
I don't
Uh,
know.
yeah. The point is that they are facing imminent destruction and
Yes.
they have limited time, which is the point of the universe.
And the only way they think they can survive it is to get these coordinates from one of the like half destroyed Romulan warships
Yeah,
obviously they're very precarious positions, so they can only like send somebody out there by shuttle to collect the coordinates and kind of hope they don't disrupt the gravitational field too much and destroy everybody in the process.
So they decide, of course, to send their best pilot, which is Sulu, and he is accompanied by a new crew member called what's
Lisa
her name?
Chandris.
Chandris. Yeah, Dr. Chandris. She's a doctor, so she's Dr. Lisa
Mhm.
Chandris. Um, Chandris is, she's very charming. The moment we see her, she's like very nice and very social, and she's very nice. I like her. I like her immediately.
She's like, "Ooh, what an admission from being on the ship for 3 days."
Yeah, she's
I'm
kind
a
of cute.
little bit nervous. Oh,
Yeah,
I get space sick. Yeah,
yeah.
it was cute.
Yeah, they have Sulu and her have like this sort of immediate chemistry, you can say.
Yeah.
They go on shuttle, they kind of talk, they find the coordinates, everything is fine until they are beaming back to the ship. Because when they are beaming back, there is a gravitational wave or some other sensory wave of some sort that disrupt the signal, and Scotty loses the signal. And when he gets it back, he only gets Sulu back. But it's a different Sulu, and the Sulu that gets beamed back upon ship is not the Sulu that went to the mission. It's a 30 years older Sulu who's dressed very weirdly and is very very aggressive and angry.
He showed up, and I was like, "Is this Barbarian Sulu
Yeah, and this
from another universe?"
yeah, and it's a Sulu played by George Takei too,
Of course,
of course.
he has to whip
They,
out his sword and like
yeah,
attack people.
wave it around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so they managed to calm him down, and they kind of talk to him, and they figure out that for them, that like disappearing, it's been like a few minutes. Sulu was apparently transported to a planet in another dimension, planet he calls Caliban. He and Chandris are just transported there. Chandris sadly died 15 years ago. They spent 30 years on that planet. Um,
What they
so
called a dead world.
yeah, they said that the plant used to have a population, but it was wiped out by disease. But it was still livable, so he and Chandris kind of lived on it for 30 years. Um, and yeah, he is 30 years older than the Sulu that went on the mission. And then Scotty picks up another signal, and Sulu urges him to get that signal and just put it there. And it turns out to be Sulu and Chandris's daughter that they had while being on the planet, a daughter they call Alana.
Hmm.
Um, the signal is kind of weaker. Scotty can't manage to really pull her all the way in. She has to be like half transported in a sort of stasis chamber. We can see her and she can talk to people, but she can't really touch anything or leave the stasis chamber.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they really, at that point, think it's a matter of just have Scotty work on it, right?
Yeah,
And
Scotty's
find a way
like,
to pull her all the way through.
yeah, there is probably a way to pull it all the way through, but they need time, they need equipment, and those are
Yeah.
two things they don't really have at the moment because they're still busy with, the spatial anomaly that is going to destroy
Yeah.
the ship in a few hours. Of course, since it's been 30 years, Sue doesn't have the tricorder, and he also doesn't remember the information we took from the ship. It was supposed to be like coordinates, exact coordinates of how they're supposed to exit the anomaly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so uh, they're basically working on two separate issues. Scotty is trying to find a way for Alana to cross over, and Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are trying to help Sulu recover the coordinates. At first, they kind of figure, maybe they're buried deep in his memories, so Spock can perform a mind meld
Yep.
and get the memory of the coordinates out that way. And he tries,
Naturally.
but yeah, he tries, but it doesn't really work. There is too much trauma, too many memories.
Hmm.
Um, he kind of goes deeper and deeper, but he can't really reach them, and they have to stop before they die because that's what usually happens in my notes. Yeah. Meanwhile, the kind of the Kirk, especially Kirk, but also kind of Scotty too, kind of talk to Alana, and Alana is also a very cute, very charming young woman. She's very excited to be here. The poor girl has never seen any other people besides her parents. She lived on a different planet,
Hmm.
so she's excited to see something other than Caliban and to see all of the stories her father told her. Come to life. The ship he worked on, the people he worked with.
Hmm.
Um, she's like she's very smart and well adjusted, considering how she grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a point at which McCoy kind of impresses upon like Kirk and Spock that like Sulu, his service in Starfleet was 30 years ago.
yeah,
All he's had since that point is just his family, this family that he created on this planet with nobody else. His priorities have probably shifted.
exactly. Yeah, it says that Sulu used to be very, very career oriented. That he never even
Hmm.
considered having a family. But on the planet, when it kind of seemed like they aren't going to be rescued anytime soon, so they just kind of went for it.
And this is the point at which they realize just how precarious their situation is.
Yeah, they realized that maybe they won't be able to get the coordinates, and because the Romulan ship that the coordinates are from blew up, they can't go back and get them that way either.
Hmm.
So they kind of have to devise some other way. They kind of Spock kind of comes up with another solution. I don't remember the sciencey mambo jumbo. I'm very sorry.
Uh,
um, but they try Spock's other solution. It doesn't work. It actually backfires. Not only are they still stuck, now the time they have to escape before the ship kind of pulls apart and explodes is significantly lower. It's now less than an hour until the ship is done for.
right.
Yeah.
And at this point, they realize that Alana is sort of intrinsically tied to her own universe.
Yeah, she cannot be fully transported into the Enterprise. So if the Enterprise pulls out, she will die. She will stop existing. But if the Enterprise explodes in the spatial anomaly, she will just go back to Caliban.
Yep.
Then Scotty figures out that he actually has Sulu's original transporter
Just
signals.
call it a buffer pattern.
Buffer pattern, yeah. Yes, the original buffer pattern from Sulu. When he managed to catch him the first time, they transported him over before the anomaly hit. And that means that if Sulu wishes to, if he agrees, they can reconfigure him somehow, transport him back to the age, to the point where he was then, and he will have the coordinates in his mind, fresh in his mind. But that means that the last 30 years will be basically erased from his existence, and it also means,
And then that's the point at which they decide to tell Sulu and Alana like what their true options are
yeah,
and
because
that
if
they can't free Alana.
exactly, because if Sulu agrees, that means that not only will his memories be erased, he will also be killing Alana.
Yeah,
But if he doesn't agree, he'll be killing everybody else on the ship.
right.
So very classic trolley problem. Of course, the fight. Sulu doesn't want to do that. Sulu is very, he loves his daughter. He wants his daughter to continue living. But Alana really wants him to do that because, well, for one thing, she's inspired by her mother. Her mother died to protect her and her father. So uh, she looks up to her and she wants to do the same as her. But also because it's kind of, even if she continues on living, it's kind of a very sad existence. She'll just be
She'll be by
transported,
herself.
yeah, completely alone on a dying world for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
That's not a very happy existence. So she manages to convince Sulu to uh, go through with it and save the ship, and of course Sulu does that, and she dies.
Yeah.
but fortunately, I guess, is fortunate in some manner because of the mind meld that Spock did earlier with the older Sulu. Spock retained the memories of older Sulu, and he can bring them back to the younger Sulu, and Sulu receives them back.
Yeah.
So he does remember Alana.
So, cut back to the present,
Yeah.
and
Cut back to the original series movies era, present.
Captain Sulu,
Captain
and
Sulu,
you see that Captain Sulu's daughter from that era, the
Demora.
one that we know of, like even from the novelization, right? Captain Sulu's daughter,
Yeah, her name is Demora.
Demora,
Yeah,
presents him with his grandchild. She named the grandchild Alana, as he kind of like as he wished, but she doesn't know who that is.
yeah. And that's when Sulu reveals to her that she had a sister, and he tells
Yeah,
her about Alana. Yeah.
right.
Um,
Cutscene.
yeah, that's a very beautiful episode. I really like this episode.
Like you said, it kind of does what some of the Star Trek episodes do really well, which is ultimate sacrifice. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not sacrificing yourself, right? It's sacrificing something you really love for the greater good. It's that one to the many aspect, right?
Yeah.
And Sula didn't really want to do it. I mean, you could clearly see he was like, "No, no, it's my daughter. I'm
Yeah.
not going to make that choice." And Alana's the one who kind of pushed him to do it. We missed the part where, for a moment, there was a hope that they thought they could somehow transport everybody on the ship to Caliban,
Oh, yeah.
and they would essentially like maroon themselves on this planet, where Sulu and Lisa originally got trapped and lived out their 30 years. But Kirk was like, "Well, better option than all of us dying, so
Yeah.
we'll do it." But everybody else is like, "Really? We're going to be stuck over there?" He's like, "Well, better than being dead."
I mean, he's right. He has a point.
Right. And then
But
he was like, asking like Alana how she feels about having some house guests. Really? 400 house guests show up? She would probably like it better
yeah.
than the way it was originally. But obviously that option was taken away from them pretty quickly.
Yeah, it turns out that the
They
accident that
couldn't do it.
transported Sulu was like a freak accident of 1 million chance, and
Yeah.
they couldn't replicate it.
But they were really stretching for like solutions, right? Because their clock is ticking down very quickly, and
Yeah,
as happens, they ended up with two options that both require some sort of sacrifice in it.
yeah,
That's not an uncommon theme in Star Trek.
that's true.
There's definitely one of those episodes where you're like, oh yeah, this definitely gave some trauma to everybody who was involved.
Yeah, I mean, compared to other dilemmas in Star Trek, I think it was sad, but it was still kind of like pretty obvious because, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, sending Alana back on her own to Caliban for the rest of her life is kind of really sad too.
it is sad. It could almost be called cruel
Yeah,
to send someone back to an existence all on their own until they die. But anyway, their options were very limited. In a sense, it kind of reminded me of the Strange New Worlds episode. Dr. Mbinga's daughter is, you can let me merge with this being and then we'll let the ship go and everybody will live, but you'll lose me.
yeah, yeah. That was very similar. Even the pattern buffers holding her is very similar concept.
Yeah, that kind of triggered that for me. There were a couple of things that stuck out to me. Like, this was a really good emotional episode. It also reminded me of like the movie where Kirk, or the episode where Kirk gets stuck on the planet and lives out, like gets
Oh,
married and like lives out a life
yeah,
because he forgot who he was.
yeah. I mean, this was better. This was better than
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah. I wrote down a couple of things that made me laugh. One was the spacesuits.
Very
Sulu and
accurate.
Dr. Chandris, when they were, it was the classic spacesuits from TOS with the
Yeah,
like
very
the
accurate.
weird silver mesh
Yeah,
and clunky looking costumes. Those were good. That awful wig on Sulu took me right back to like movie Con.
Yes, yes,
Ramona,
exactly.
that like
Yes.
long stringy gray hair, and just his whole like leather outfit was very reminiscent of the TOS movies.
There was the scene. Yeah, there was just one thing about the costume. There was the scene like when he leaves the sick bay and he puts on all of his things, and McCoy says, "You know, you don't need that," and he's like, "Yeah, I know." And he just walks out, and everybody is staring at him.
Yeah. Um, and then the other one was like Sulu and Lisa Chandra getting like stranded on the dead world where it's not inhospitable per se, but it's like just them. Reminded me a lot of when Kirk sent off Khan and his followers, whatever her name was, I don't remember. The historian
Yeah,
to the Centauri planet and basically find out later that it wasn't very hospitable and Khan's love interest dies. I was like, oh, that kind of reminds me of that.
yeah. Well, I mean, no one sent Sulu there on
Well,
purpose.
no,
Yeah,
it's not an uncommon expectation in a sci-fi show, right? You're
yeah,
going to alien worlds, you don't always know what life is on them or what the conditions are, and sometimes if you get stranded on one, like what do you do? It's like being stuck on an island, right? You're the last two people on an island
yeah.
and you just have to eke out an existence.
Exactly.
We should mention that Lisa was a fan of Shakespeare.
Yeah,
That's
I
why she
mean,
named the planet Caliban.
yeah, I mean, I thought this was very Star Trekky, like all the
It
Shakespeare
was.
since it was from the Tempest, I think, and they
Yeah.
quote the Tempest later on.
Yep.
Yeah,
Um, the only thing that left me scratching my heads was when they blew up the Romulan ships, the three birds of prey, right?
yeah.
And they're sending Sulu and his companion to on this mission to retrieve the coordinates. I was just like, are you sure all those Romulans are dead? I don't know. I guess I've gotten used to like people blowing up spaceships, but like not everybody on the ship dying immediately. That I just kind of assumed like just because you like disabled the ships, blew up part of them, there's probably some survivors on there.
Yeah,
But obviously that assumption was accurate because we got to see like a dead Romulan
yeah, we saw.
on the floor.
Um, yeah. I mean, also another thing I want to point out is like the CGI is like the show has used some CGI usually at the outer
Hmm.
exterior shots in space, but this time we got CGI like in interior shots, like in the Shadow Bay and on the Romulan ship.
Yeah,
Um, it's
yeah,
very definitely early 2000s CGI.
yeah.
It doesn't hold up that great. Um, but it's kind of I don't know, it has kind of like an old time charm, I guess.
It does have a charm to it, because you're still seeing elements of TOS and like the funny costumes and the wigs and the
Yeah,
props, but like the ship itself, like the sets that they rebuilt, the CGI that they used in place of like the planets elevates it.
yeah,
It's like you're getting some of the old school, but you get it with this charm of like better props and better CGI and fade to blacks and stuff like that. It just makes it fun. It kind of reminds me of why I like Strange New Worlds so much because Strange New Worlds is like they kept what you consider like the classic stuff, but it's all clearly modernized,
yeah, yeah,
right? And
yeah,
they you could see the fan series is like working its way towards that, even though they definitely love their old school, their like original
props and
like
stuff.
callbacks.
Yeah, yeah. I also want to point out that the actors of Olana and Dr. Chandris, Olana was played by Christina Moses, and Dr. Chandris was played by Leah Johnson. Both of them did a great job, I think.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed their characters.
I don't know what it is, but this fan series in general is definitely like growing on me. I was kind of like shaky with the pilot in the first episode, but having seen these last two episodes, I guess getting Walter Koenig or George Takei like back in the episode, some other well known faces. But you can see, you know how you watch a show and in the beginning it's like, I'm not sure, but then you see it kind of like get its footing.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
starting to feel like they're finding their footing, but it could also be because they're like bringing back some experienced writers.
Hmm.
The actors are kind of like probably feeling their characters more.
Yeah, I personally I think it's very it definitely the writing is getting better. Yeah, the
Hmm.
first episode of the pilot, the writing was kind of shaky, but yeah, these two episodes were much better written.
Yeah, it felt less like an homage to the original done by a bunch of fans who just want to talk about everything they love, Star Trek,
Yeah.
and more like a show, a well produced show
Mm-hmm.
on a fan series budget.
Exactly.
Kudos to them for that.
Yeah. Great job, guys. In the unlikely case you're listening. Yeah, so those were our thoughts on the episodes 2 and 3 of the fan series Star Trek New
Hmm.
Voyages.
My last comment would be sort of, I don't think in the, I guess, the 4 episodes that we've seen anything new. It's Star Trek themes and like some new episodes with like new plot lines, but in a sense it's all kind of like, haven't we seen that before in some fashion?
Yeah, I guess I get what you're coming from, but I think that's kind of the point. They're trying to continue the original
Yeah,
series.
yeah.
I mean, they're too afraid to kill off Chekhov, so I don't think they're going to stray too much from what we already have.
When you start a new Star Trek series, right?
Yeah,
You definitely expect it to do what you want to see, like what's come before. You want the familiar and the things that you like and the callbacks, right? But at the same time, you want new characters, different stakes, a different villain, those kinds of things. I guess what I'm trying to say is the fan series, because to your point, it is just an extension of the original series, as if it had had a 4th season. Shouldn't be, I guess, thought of with those expectations.
yeah.
I don't
I
know if
mean,
I'm expressing that correctly.
yeah, I would
It's a
say
new Star Trek show, but it's not.
exactly. It's just more of the original series for people who miss the original
Yeah.
series.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So that those are our thoughts on New Voyages. If anybody's been watching this show, we'd love to hear your comments about it. But Soda and I will continue to periodically watch an episode or two and come back with our thoughts.
yeah, yeah. So until next time,
All right. Thanks, everyone.
bye.